Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us during this incredibly busy and exciting time period here in Washington, D.C. So much to talk about. The left is literally screaming about President Trump's reforms to government. I'll give you the updates there, and USAID. We've got confirmation updates, both good and bad. Plus massive move by President Trump to protect women and children from the left-wing extremists that want to really hurt them, in my view. We've got a new lawsuit about Kamala. We have new details about a court order about Jack Smith and Fannie Willis corruption and collusion. Plus an important new brief we filed about the pernicious use of race to figure out who's going to be in Congress. You're not going to believe what we are still fighting about in our courts in this day and age. First up, though, is the hysteria I talked about a little bit last week over President Trump's efforts to curtail, rein in, audit, and control the massive entity known as USAID. Some people call it USAID. I call it USAID because that's what I've always called it. The United States Agency for International Development. And monies from USAID, and frankly from the State Department generally, are often used, and too often used, not for what people consider reasonable uses and purposes, truly charitable and aid, charitable type aid that people might support, but essentially to fund the left-wing infrastructure abroad, an infrastructure that's used to undermine American interests and values in various countries, and of course just generally undermine what most Americans believe should be taking place in various countries. They should have governments that are free and respectful of democratic norms, but not socialist and Marxist. And USAID works with the left to ensure the latter. And Judicial Watch has been investigating this issue for years and years, and I'll talk more about this, but I want to talk about how the big media and the left has responded to this. You've had Democratic politicians decide that no government spending should be looked at and controlled or even paused so it could be audited. So under the left's perspective, the government can never be controlled. And this is at odds with the very principles of our constitutional republic. There's a famous book written, I don't think it's the title, but you should look it up. I think it may be free on Amazon if you have an Amazon account. It is called The Political Control of the Administrative State. And that's the way the republic is supposed to work. That when you have a president, he's able to exercise political control of the administrative state. He's the elected official across the nation. And so within law, his policies and guidelines and values should be implemented. And that means monies that, unless they are required to go out, should not go out. And that funds and discretionary spending should be made in accordance with the values of the president as endorsed by the voters in electing him. Now, the left does not believe that President Trump should be able to exercise those presidential prerogatives. And so they've gone into inciting violence, encouraging insurrection, and sedition by government employees. And we've got a number of clips talking about these issues. Here's some left-wing congresswoman who is completely out of control. And watch this video.
We will not take this. We will fight back.
Fight back. Fight back.
And as I close out, because I know we've been out here for a long time, and God damn it, shut down the Senate. We are at war. Anytime a person can pay $250 million into a campaign and they be given full access to the Department of Treasury of the United States of America, we are at war.
So Elon Musk, as an employee of the government of the United States working for the president, shouldn't be able to access material or resources or computer systems on behalf of the president? Is that how it works? Of course that's how it works. And they're willing to incite violence, shut down the city. What does that mean? Riots? We're at war? Why that violent rhetoric? Now, to give you up to date of what Musk has been trying to do, and with Marco Rubio working at the State Department, our Secretary of State, they are seeking to essentially neuter USAID as much as they're able under law. Now, there's a debate whether they can close it entirely, but in the least, Marco Rubio can exercise significant control over the agency and it seems to me either relieve of duty or move out or fire, whatever the term is or whatever the employee personnel move would be, these USAID bureaucrats and hangers-on that basically just spend our money in irresponsible ways. There's no doubt about it. Now, some of the courts have intervened in some of the moves Musk has tried to make. There's been some restriction on his ability or the ability of president's employees to access information at Treasury, which seems to be an odd legal position to have for a court. He's the chief executive. And then there's been a delay in the deadline set by President Trump's team in terms of offering people a way out of a resignation path by giving them several months of severance. Now, the deadline for people to decide whether to take it was Friday, but that deadline was extended. But nevertheless, 60,000 people, upwards of 60,000 people, have already said, hey, we'll resign, we'll take the money and go. So the federal employment is at 2.3, 2.4 million. We're broke. There's got to be cuts. And so this is all, relatively speaking, quite modest in terms of government spending, right? 60,000 employees out of a workforce of 2.3 million, $40 billion, whatever the bill is for USAID, out of a what's the budget now, 4 trillion? I remember when it was 1 trillion, I was outraged. So really modest reforms, and that's the reaction. Threats of death and violence from the left. And here are Democratic leaders in front, I believe, I think they're in the front of USAID, and they, again, more mob type violence from the Democratic left here.
As you probably saw, Elon Musk and his crew put a gag order on AID employees. They disconnected them from email, which is putting lives at risk around the world. So we are here to enter the building, and so we can hear firsthand from whoever is here at AID, or at least witness firsthand what is happening with this Elon Musk attempted takeover, which will not stand. We will prevail. Let's go.
So how is that substantively different than January 6th, what you just saw there? The president's team had closed the building. So the building was closed. Yet these public officials and whoever they were, their left-wing allied activists were there trying to get into a closed building. Isn't that an insurrection? And then Schumer is making, in my view, a fool of himself. At least he wasn't directly advocating for violence like he has previously in targeting Supreme Court justices. And here I had a reaction video, kind of fun, to what he was saying.
We will win. 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 We won't rest. We won't rest.
I still think that's pretty funny. I'm still laughing about that. But there he's standing next to Maxine Waters, who has incited violence during the first term of Trump against cabinet officials. Told them to confront them. She told activists to confront them in a way that was guaranteed to incite violence and endanger their lives. And then, of course, you know, what the left does for any, because a reporter asked me about this earlier today. And what happens is the left obviously has gravitates to the bureaucracies in government for many reasons. The most obvious of which is it's the easiest way to exercise unaccountable power and advance their agenda. And what happens is when you have reformers come in, and usually they oppose Republican appointees. Generally, the deep state does, the bureaucracies. And if it's a conservative Republican, it's all the more worse. And a conservative reformer, worse, worse, worse. And that's why Trump and his appointees had such initial problems in the first term. Well, he's much, much more aggressive and on point, and in terms of speed, shock and awe, right? But you can see that's what they're doing to Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a patriot. He is concerned about the misuse and abuse of taxpayer resources. He is working on behalf of the President of the United States, asking questions that any normal citizen would ask. How are you spending the money that we earned? How can we save some money for taxpayers? They're taking our money and wasting it. Forget about the policy. It's like, well, can we get it done cheaper? And they hate that idea. I mean, first of all, because the easiest way to curtail government spending is stop defunding the left and their radical policy groups. And so what the left does is they try to isolate. They target first, and then they isolate, harass, smear, and try to, frankly, destroy any reformers who take on the deep state. And you may think, well, who knows about USAID? Well, they know about USAID. Otherwise, they wouldn't be out there being crazy about it, because they know once you pull the plug on USAID, it sets in motion a whole series of events, hopefully, to pull the plug on other government funding of the radical left. And here is one of the most radical leftists in Congress, AOC, attacking Elon Musk for, quote, by the way, the head of 3 successful companies, the richest man in the world, literally a rocket scientist. And this is what AOC says about him.
First and foremost, understand that there is already a federal agency who is a watchdog on waste in the United States. That is known as the Government Accountability Office. So all of these people acting like, oh, we're going to set up an agency to identify waste, as though that's never been an idea before, take a number. These people, and I can tell you, in my experience, I have encountered many billionaires in my career. You all have seen many of those encounters in hearings, in other, forms of questioning, etc. I can tell you that this dude is probably one of the most unintelligent billionaires I have ever met or seen or witnessed. Which
can you believe that's a congressman? She's met all these billionaires, and he's the stupidest or one of the most unintelligent. It's kind of a desperate smear of Musk. In part, it's been going on for years. Biden was trying to put him in jail, essentially. And at least that's better than what you're going to see next. the left has literally resorted to just screaming. Rather than talking or persuading, trying to convince their fellow citizens, this is what the left is doing up in New York.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, this is disturbing behavior. Is this what free speech now is for the left? An inarticulate scream? Are these? You know, to me, that's the flip side of violence. I'm not saying those people are violent, but if you're willing just to scream in response to your political opponents, it isn't too far removed, I think, from pursuing violence against them. Now, I'm glad that USAID is finally in the sights of government reformers. Now, to be clear, during the first Trump administration, there were attempts to try to rein in USAID that were largely missed, but they did try to hit it. And USAID has been in the sights of anyone who's concerned about government spending for years. And ironically, the left at times doesn't like USAID because it wasn't hardcore enough in terms of advancing its values, and they would support governments that they didn't like, which are fair criticisms. Americans don't want foreign aid. They don't want it. And we're always lectured by the left and the media and, frankly, some Republicans why foreign aid is useful. Americans aren't persuaded. They've made the arguments, and Americans don't want it. And Trump, of course, understands that more directly. My personal view is I like foreign aid that, involves guns and bullets, basically military aid. That's the only type of foreign aid that I support. And even then, it should be loans and leases and things like that so that we're not too far out of pocket, too much out of pocket. I mean, we defend the free world. We're the economic engine of the world. That's all the foreign aid that we have to worry about. A vibrant economy, our values, our culture, in the traditional sense of the word, our constitutional system, that will save the rest of the world. Not spending money on corrupt politicians or foreign policy aid groups or NGOs that basically launder our money to advance their radical extremist agenda. And one of the folks that Judicial Watch is focused on, and Judicial Watch has been investigating USAID, for as long as I can remember. I went and highlighted some of our prior work on our tweet feed, our X feed, I guess I'm supposed to call it. Let's go through these headlines from 2017. U.S. gives Soros groups millions to destabilize Macedonia's conservative government. 2017, we exposed that. 2018, Judicial Watch. New documents show State Department and USAID working with Soros Group to channel money to a mercenary army of far-left activists in Albania. U.S. subsidizes Soros' radical leftist agenda worldwide, new Judicial Watch report shows. And I'll link to all of this below. And so we've got some videos of my talking about these issues. Well, I don't know, 2018? How long ago was that? 7 years ago? 6, 7 years ago. Let's run the first video.
Judicial Watch, as I discussed recently, has numerous federal lawsuits trying to figure out the extent of taxpayer support, particularly under the Obama administration, for the Soros Open Society organizations, especially their activities abroad. We've sued the State Department and USAID, which is a funder of supposedly groups that better civil society in other countries. And of course, they're giving money to the Soros operations. We've investigated Albania, Macedonia, Romania, Colombia, and Guatemala. And we filed 4 lawsuits related to State Department funding for Soros's radical agenda. And one of those lawsuits struck pay dirt, which is the lawsuit over its activities in Albania. Albania is controlled by a left-wing communist government. There's really no other way to describe it. So of course the Soros organizations are supportive of this government. And your tax dollars are going to bolster its efforts to consolidate power. Specifically, $9 million in taxpayer money, our documents that we uncovered as a result of the lawsuit show, were sent to Soros by the Obama administration in 2016. Specifically, the USAID funneled money through the agency's Civil Society Project to the foundations, the Soros Foundation's groups in Albania. It's called a Justice for All campaign, which was overseen by Soros's East-West Management Institute. So what was going on is the judiciary was a little too independent for the leftists in power, and they wanted to push an effort to, quote, reform the judiciary, meaning bring it back under control of the leftist authoritarians running Albania. So Soros was on the side, unfortunately, of the authoritarians, and our tax dollars were being used to subsidize this effort.
So that's a much younger me, frighteningly younger me, talking about the subsidies for Soros. And here's another clip shortly thereafter further explaining it. As we're worrying about what's going on in the United States, the left, often with your taxpayer resources, is working its will all over the world. We've uncovered how that was going on in Macedonia. You see this issue in Ukraine as well. These Soros groups supposedly are anti-corruption, but they're political players that come down on one side of the political spectrum, it looks like. Yeah, and as I recall, with what Soros was doing with USAID and or the State Department, was that he was collaborating, or his people were collaborating, in helping direct the spending. So there'd be a chunk of change that Soros's people would provide advice on as to who to give money to. So not only were they getting the money, but they were also funneling it to favored groups. And I don't know about you, I don't think George Soros should get a dime of taxpayer money. He doesn't, A, need it. Why is he getting money? Forget about the politics. It's like, I mean, would you want to give Elon Musk millions of dollars in taxpayer money to advance his political ideas in other countries? I don't know, maybe you would. I don't think he needs it, and he'd do it on his own anyway. And then I was on Fox a few years ago with Tucker when he was still on there, talking about this as well. Let's go to Fox.
Tom Fitton is the president of Judicial Watch, and he joins us tonight. One of the reasons I'm so glad that you're here, Tom, is because you kind of tie a bow on stories. The Obama administration's over, but there's a lot that they did that we don't know anything about because the president.
I can't hear, so you're going to have to tell me when.
Tell us this small piece of it. What did they do in Albania and why?
Well, they're supporting the socialist communist government there, the Soros operations, and they're doing it with taxpayer dollars. They were doing it in 2016. And they were even doing it in the first part of the Trump administration in 2017, co-sponsoring surveys of the population that generated 91% of the support in favor of the pro-government, pro-Soros operation that would have restricted the independence of the judiciary. You know, like all strongman governments, they don't like independent judiciaries. Right. So they were trying to reform the judiciary in a way that would have brought it under control of the socialist government there. And what's troubling is that obviously Soros needs no taxpayer money to do any of this advocacy work. But the State Department and USAID is partnering with Soros and basically allowing Soros to set our foreign policy agenda. And then secondly, Soros's operations, according to these documents, were allowed to come into the State Department and provide technical reviews of other applications for other government money in Albania.
But, I mean, George...
So there you go. A little bit grayer now, but the issue hasn't changed. And there's still battles in town over funding for, I don't know specifically Soros, right? I haven't checked the numbers recently. But But USAID, it's a nightmare a nightmare when it comes to transparency. Right this second, they are still fighting us about, we sued, and I told you about the lawsuit a few weeks ago. Prior to, I think, most of this coming down, USAID was giving money to Gaza, groups in Gaza, and we wanted the details. I think it was $24 million. Was it $24 million? I think it was $24 million. Let me look at the press release. Was it $24 million, guys? Feel free to chime in. I can't hear you, $27 million. And there were recipients of that money, and they don't want to tell us who the recipients are. How do you like that? Now, they're supposed to get back to us soon about this. It'll be interesting to see if the Trump administration is going to change their transparency views from the Biden people. But you know why they don't want to give us the names of or the entities they were giving money to in Gaza. I guarantee you they're connected to Hamas and terrorism. I guarantee you. And so, my point being, Judicial Watch has been second to none in trying to pursue what USAID has been up to. Not just like criticizing them because someone started criticizing them here in town finally, which is great. I mean, that's just great. But we've been in court to try to get information about USAID. Who else has been in court trying to do this? I'm not aware of anyone else. Time and time again, going back years, because we've known for years that USAID is a money laundering operation for the radical left, including, it looks like, George Soros. So I'm hoping President Trump is able to shut it down. You know, and as I noted in, and I've been talking about this issue as well on the media. I was on, I was on Newsmax earlier this week talking about how important this issue is.
President of Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, joining me right now. Tom, it's always a pleasure. You know, it's telling to see how angry these Democrats get when you take away their power to tell the rest of us what to do and how to run our lives, yes?
Well, it's even more direct. You're taking away their money. The left relies on agencies like USAID to launder tax money into their groups, their related groups, that then spend it to advance their agenda abroad, and in certain circumstances you get government monies going to advance their agenda at home. This is really, I think, a indictment of the Democratic Party and the left, that they're so crazed about the president's desires to curb waste, fraud, and abuse. President Trump, and frankly all members of the executive branch, have a positive constitutional obligation to take reasonable steps to ensure our money isn't being wasted. That has not been done for a generation here in Washington, D.C., and all the screaming and yelling and caterwauling about all this suggests he's onto something. And Musk is.
And I was on OANN, our friends over there, with John Hines, talking about this issue as well.
President Donald Trump recently signed an executive order suspending foreign aid and placing an independent agency known as the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, under the purview of the State Department. In the past, the agency has had close ties with one globalist billionaire, at least, George Soros, and some of his foundations for many decades, according to reports by the Heritage Foundation. With us is Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Tom, what do we know of George Soros and his connections with some of these foreign aid disbursements from agencies like USAID?
Well, Judicial Watch uncovered how George Soros linked groups and his Open Society Foundation partnered with USAID, received funding from taxpayers as a result. And I don't know about you, but I don't think George Soros needs the help of the taxpayer to do anything he wants. And what happens is Soros is active in a particular country. USAID comes and partners with him directly or indirectly, and entities he controls or funds. And the advocacy resulting from that is leftism and anti-Americanism, and just pushing the agenda that the left pushes here, they do in other countries with taxpayer support.
So we're getting the message out. It's so important that we get a hold as to what USAID is doing, because it's just the tip of the iceberg. And if we can't collectively, meaning the American people, can't control that, rein in that type of spending so that it's in the least ideologically neutral to the degree it occurs at all, then we're not going to get much else done. And this is why Congress needs to get its act together. They haven't passed the bill to cut $1 in spending. There's been no talk, other than through Trump's leadership, of cutting back government agencies. I mean, the last we heard from Congress on spending was they fully funded the Biden administration's policies several months ago. There's another decision on that coming up in March. Now they're coming up with budget resolutions and such. Now, are they going to curtail government spending in USAID? Are they going to shut it down? Are they going to shut down the education department, as President Trump is calling for? He's trying to curtail it as he's able to do under law. But in the end, it looks like Congress has to literally has to shut it down. Where's the Republican leadership in Congress on not only spending, but ending government agencies that are not advancing the public interest and are arguably outside what the Constitution allows for or what the Republic demands in terms of government here in the United States. So there's a lot going on, and I appreciate Trump really I can't keep up with it. Can you keep up with it? All the good things he's doing? I can't. I mean, I go on his White House website and pull up all these executive orders. It's just great order after great order. Now, not all of it can be fully implemented without more help from Congress, but he can do a lot. You know, for every step forward Biden took, or backwards Biden took, depending on your point of view. I don't know which is the easier way to describe the metaphor. Trump can take an equal step to cancel it. That's how I would read it. So let's see what happens. And the only way he can get a lot of that work done is by having good people around him. And he got two new good people around him this week, where the Senate finally confirmed Pam Bondi as Attorney General of the United States. So she now is at the Justice Department running the show. One of her first acts as Justice Department Attorney General was to organize working groups, or that's what she called them, of personnel to investigate the lawfare against Trump and the abuses of American citizens, either school boards going after Catholics, going after pro-life protesters, the January 6 abusers as well, and see what went on. Was there collusion with the Justice Department and under Biden and Alvin Bragg and Soros-backed prosecutor, by the way, and Fannie Willis down in Georgia? So that's a good start. I would just open up criminal investigations into the violations, evidently, of people's civil rights under the color of law. But I guess, it's the Justice Department. They just go slow all the time. And as I've said previously, I think President Trump should just directly appoint special counsels, because the Justice Department can't investigate itself. The FBI can't investigate itself. I don't believe they can. Let me be clear. I don't think they can be trusted to investigate themselves, especially the FBI. And the other person who was appointed and confirmed this week was Russ Vought, who is now the head of the Office of Management and Budget, which is the key bureaucratic agency within an administration in terms of setting policy, budgets, and policies and procedures for other federal agencies. So he's keeper of the keys in many ways to how policies are promulgated within the government and regulations are approved, etc. So I don't think there's a regulation that exists that doesn't have to go through an OMB process. Now Trump obviously smart, but Elon Musk, he quickly figured out, and this is what drives the left crazy, well, how do we pay our bills in the government? Well, the Treasury Department pays the bills. Oh, so you mean we don't have to be at each specific agency trying to figure out what goes on? Well, that helps. But all the bills get routed, practically speaking, through the Treasury Department. And that's why the left was furious when Trump and his people showed up at the Treasury Department and asked questions about how the bills were paid. Because once they figure out the centralized billing, essentially, or accounts, what do they call it, accounts payable, where the money's going out? Accounts receivable, depending on what's happening. Who writes the checks? Who signs the checks? And Musk figured out, well, Treasury does. And if all these decisions, all this government spending is going through essentially one group of systems, well, let's get a hold as to how those systems operate. Let's look at the data. Let's analyze the data to curtail waste, fraud, and abuse. And so everything you're hearing about the left screaming about Musk, you had some people defaming Musk by saying he was stealing money by trying to figure out what Treasury was spending. I mean, lunacy. Just great developments for reform. And I know not all of it's going to stick, but we've made so much progress than we typically would have made in prior administrations. Just the debate has changed in a way that benefits the public good because we're now talking about the size of government, how much it's spending. You know, and from Judicial Watch's perspective, we know that when government spends a lot of money, it's usually for corrupt purposes. They can't tie their shoes without some waste, fraud, or abuse happening. And usually, a lot of these programs, especially the big ones that have all the hullabaloo around them, are to take care of their friends. Zero to do with the public interest. Now, who hasn't been confirmed? Kash Patel. As I said, I went to his confirmation hearing last week. Democrats have delayed it, or the consideration of his confirmation before the Judiciary Committee. Normally they would have been voting on it around now. So there's a further delay. So there's been no FBI director for several weeks, which is dangerous, to be blunt. It's dangerous. Now there's the left media is again crying, and the left Democrat politicians are crying because there's been accountability demanded from the FBI. You had the acting FBI director stalling and trying to curtail efforts to figure out who in the FBI was working on January 6 prosecutions. And the number that was bandied about was 5,000. I bet you it was more than 5,000, by the way. There are only 38,000 people who work in the FBI. 12,000 or so of them are FBI agents. They had 5,000 people working for 1 minute even on January 6th. If that doesn't indict the January 6th prosecutions, I don't know what does. And what Trump's people are trying to get a figure out is who was involved, what was the extent of their involvement, and were the abuses inherent in this process make them culpable for the decisions they made. And they don't want you to do that. And they don't want Kash Patel there to help do that. Now, Kash wants to reform the FBI. I don't think it's reformable. But I tell you, I want the list of those FBI agents. Why isn't that public? It ought to be. And we're asking for it under FOIA. So all these lists DOJ has been compiling of officials who may have engaged in improper conduct or conduct that deserves further scrutiny, we want that information as well. And we hope the Trump administration makes it publicly available. But we, as you know, we may sue if we don't get the records. I mean, I want justice. I want justice. The FBI came to my house in a retaliatory move by the Biden administration to serve a subpoena. Imagine getting a knock on the door for something like that. I trust the FBI as far as I could throw them. I really do. And so Kash Patel is about as good a pick as a president could make for FBI director. And I stand strong behind Kash Patel. And I had this video, I did this video promoting his appointment after it was made, I guess a few months ago now.
President Trump made another inspired choice. He announced over the weekend that he is planning to appoint Kash Patel, my friend, to be the FBI director. Presumably he's going to fire Wray, or Wray's going to resign. The FBI is almost irredeemably compromised, and Kash Patel is nearly the perfect choice to go in there, bring transparency, reform, and accountability. Now, Kash is going to be attacked by the usual suspects, but he has a demonstrated record of uncovering, exposing, quite bravely, the corruption at the FBI and in the deep state, and he has vast experience working the bureaucracies on behalf of the American people. So what do you think Kash Patel should be investigating once he becomes FBI director? I've got a long list. But one of the things I think he certainly needs to investigate is FBI corruption and the targeting of Trump and other innocent Americans for political purposes by the corrupted Federal Bureau of Investigation. President Trump.
Yeah, Kash can't be put in an FBI director soon enough. And, you know, I know John Thune, who's the new majority leader for the Senate, the Republican leader. You know, they'll tell you they're going as fast as they can. I will tell you, well, maybe they've gone faster than previous Republican Senates in terms of handling nominations, but they're not going as fast as they can. There are always ways to go faster in the Senate. There's really no good reason any of these folks couldn't have been confirmed by now. So I encourage you, especially for Kash Patel, to share your views with your senators as to how quickly his nomination should proceed, and to use all steps available to them under Senate rules to advance his nomination, because it's an emergency. The FBI is out of control. It's an emergency. We need someone there who's honest and willing to do the heavy lifting to clean it up. And Kash Patel fits the bill. You can share your views with your senators by calling 202-225-3121, 202-225-3121. And by the way, ask your senators, call your congressman, ask them, are they going to cut the FBI given the abuses that they engaged in? Is anyone talking about that? I doubt it, but ask them anyway. Because I said, I've observed before, and I will say it again, and I say I'm half joking, maybe I'm a quarter joking now. Kash Patel should be the last FBI director. I don't think the FBI is worth saving at this point. I know what they've done. I mean, look what they did to Trump. Like what they did to me, they came to my house. I guess it's not the end of the world, relatively speaking, compared to what they did to Trump. To the crazed targeting of the January 6ers, treating nonviolent offenders like they were terrorists, trying to spy on Catholics, wanting to send spies into the pews, targeting parents who were concerned about their children and going to speak out at board school, This is a FBI is a menace to our freedoms. Time and time again has been shown to be the case. And that's why I think it really needs, in the least, a radical haircut in funding and in terms of its powers, duties, and responsibilities. And I don't even think that's enough, as I said. So forgive me for getting a little angry there. Good news this week. The president took steps to protect the health, safety, and privacy of women and children, or women and girls specifically, with an executive order that has the effect of prohibiting men identifying as women from participating in organized women's sports. The NCAA has used the lack of clarity allegedly by the federal government, or discordant views by the federal government, even during the Biden administration, to allow men to participate in female athletic events. And of course, it's bled down to high schools and other well, actually lower than high schools in some circumstances. That's what I meant to say. And so President Trump issued the following executive order. Let's bring that up. Keeping men out of women's sports. Let's see what it says here. In recent years, many educational institutions and athletic associations have allowed men to compete in women's sports. This is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports. Moreover, under Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972, Title IX is the famous law that essentially requires equal opportunity for women in sporting for institutions receiving federal funds. Ignoring fundamental biological truths, he quoting a federal court, between the two sexes deprives women and girls of meaningful access to educational activities. Therefore, it is the policy of the United States to rescind all funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities, which results in the endangerment, humiliation, and silencing of women and girls and deprives them of privacy. It shall also be the policy of the United States to oppose male competitive participation in women's sports more broadly as a matter of safety, fairness, dignity, and truth. And so President Trump had a wonderful signing, public signing of this executive order. Let's go to the video of that. Look at all those little kids around him, girls who are now protected and safer because of this.
I want to make this a really good signature. This is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
So isn't that great? You know, I did a tweet, at least I think I did a tweet, or I remember making the observation somewhere that President Trump has done more to protect the health, safety, privacy, and fundamental rights of girls and women than any president in recent memory. Just with those acts protecting girls and women from transgender extremism. I mean, their safety, their privacy, their dignity, their health. Now, you can be sure there'll be challenges to this, but the NCAA immediately changed their position on participation, and they changed the rules. Men can't participate in women's sports. Here's a statement by the executive, Charles Baker. The NCAA is an organization, blah, blah, blah. The NC Board of Governors is reviewing the executive order and will take necessary steps to align policy in the coming days. There you go. It's over. It's over. So now let the lawsuits begin, right? But great news. So other great news this week. For our social media outreach efforts, I hit 3 million followers on X. What an incredible number. Really exciting because I use the X account to reach Americans about Judicial Watch's work, and the idea that I can tweet out, hopefully helpful tweets to 3 million Americans is just great. And I highlighted it on Twitter here. Let's go to. I'm going to keep on asking questions about it. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep on asking questions about it. Yeah, and I do. I have 3 million questions still. 3 million followers. It's just great. And I don't know how many Twitter followers does Judicial Watch have? I think it's 2.5 million. Can someone tell me? 2.2 million followers of Judicial Watch. So maybe there's a cross section that follow us both. But think of the reach as a result of that. And then, of course, we have millions of followers on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Rumble, Truth Social, all the media company, all the social media platforms. And this is why the left has wanted to curtail the internet, because not because they're winning on the internet, it's because they were losing on the internet. It drives them crazy that I'm able to say what I'm able to say on my tweet feed. It drives them crazy that Judicial Watch is able to promote our great work and educate countless Americans on our Twitter feed. You know, it used to be if someone saw me on the street and they recognized me, it was because they saw me on media, right? Now, I would say 8 times out of 10, it's I follow you on social media. So social media has really pushed out legacy media or traditional media in terms of where people go to for news and information. And so I'm proud to have 3 million followers in the sense that it's such a phenomenal support. It's a sign of such phenomenal support for the work I do at Judicial Watch, and of course Judicial Watch's great work generally. And so I encourage you to follow Judicial Watch, follow me, follow this channel, wherever you're watching this video, follow it. But not only follow it, comment and share. The algorithms are key to getting the information out right these days, right? Now, Facebook is unlocking its algorithms. So Facebook isn't going to be suppressing Judicial Watch and me the way they used to. Twitter is a much more free platform because of Elon Musk. And frankly, Elon Musk is leading to freedom on these other platforms as well, like Facebook and Instagram. Even Google is pushing back against the censorship hounds on the left. They've been somewhat terrible on YouTube, by the way. And we're also on TikTok. We're careful. But there are tons of people on TikTok. I do know who runs TikTok. But I think if the Chinese communists are going to let us come on and tell the world about our values and why we need honest government, I'm going to be there. And the Chinese TikTok company is, they've censored us, but no more or no less so than American companies. So I tell you, it's a very strange situation. But great news about Judicial Watch having so many social media followers, and it makes us a powerful force. I mean, if I send out a tweet telling people to call senators hear from people. If Judicial Watch sends out an email we have millions of people on our email list. You wouldn't believe the numbers. I think I know what the number is, but I think I may be off significantly, so I don't want to share it directly. But it's a massive email list. And so we don't rely on the media to get the word out. We use the media to get the word out, but it's not the only way. We can get the word out on Twitter. We can get the word out on Truth Social, on Facebook, on YouTube. And what I love about my Twitter account, or X account, I keep on calling, is that there are lots of people I'm always excited to share their tweets, because it's like, obviously I focus on a lot of what Judicial Watch does, but when I see something worth sharing, I'm happy to share it. If I see another conservative group sharing, putting out great information, I push it out. Heritage, Media Research Center, members of Congress doing the right thing, I push it out. I encourage my friends and allies in the movement and who are doing investigations and journalists and stuff, if they have interesting information, let me know, and I will share it if I can. Sometimes I'm like, this isn't worth sharing. But if it's interesting, I'll share it. So I encourage you to follow Judicial Watch. Follow me, obviously, but really follow Judicial Watch's work on social media. Because for every, when you subscribe to us on YouTube or subscribe to us on Facebook, it's difficult to overstate the value of that to Judicial Watch. It really makes our work easier. It ensures that more people are likely to see our work, because the more subscribers helps us build viewership among the platforms, because the platforms reward engagement, reward large followers with more eyeballs that the information shared with. So that's my non-technical understanding of the algorithms on internet. But I want to thank you all, those of you who follow me on Twitter or on X. I keep on saying Twitter, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Elon. I can't get it out of my head. So great stuff. And I encourage you to follow Judicial Watch's website too. Go to judicialwatch.org, because that's where the documents are. And you can share your email with us and we'll keep you updated. So if the commies finally shut down the internet, at least we can, send you an email or two. So great news there. But wait, there's more. So we had a nice little victory in court the other day against the Biden gang over their refusal to give us information about their communications with Fani Willis. You remember Fani Willis, right? I'm trying to find the press release here. Forgive me, here it is. So Fani Willis, you may recall, was found to be in default in a Judicial Watch lawsuit for records about her collusion that we thought was happening with the Justice Department and the January 6th committee. She didn't answer the lawsuit, and the court found her in default. She didn't show up and answer. And one of the sanctions as a result of that is that she had to pay us attorney's fees. Well, we finally got the money. It was 10 days late, but she did send us the attorney's fees. It was nearly $22,000. Don't ask me if we cashed the check. I'm sure we will or have. And she was ordered to search for and release documents about her collusion or in response to our requests for communications with the Pelosi January 6th gang and Jack Smith, DOJ, etc. She said she had no documents with Jack Smith, but she said she had documents showing communications with Pelosi for confirming the collusion in the efforts to get Donald Trump. But of course, Judicial Watch being as, I don't know if it's savvy, it would make sense that we would ask both parties for records, right? Now, Congress typically isn't subject to FOIA requests or open records requests, but the Justice Department is. And so what we did was we asked for, and when we got the hand to the face, we sued the Justice Department for records on their any documents they had. Let me see. Let me read the exact request. We sued in October 2023 after the Department of Justice failed to comply with an August 2023 Freedom of Information Act request for records detailing, quote, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office requesting or receiving federal funds or other federal assistance regarding the investigations of Donald Trump and others. Pretty simple request. On December 18, 2023, the Justice Department issued its final response to this request, refusing to confirm or deny the existence of responsive records. It argued that releasing the records could reasonably be expected to interfere with law enforcement proceedings. So that can be a hurdle, right? And I think it's garbage, but sometimes the courts defer to the Justice Department in matters like that. But what happened since was the Trump stuff was shut down. There were no federal court proceedings involving Trump. Did they tell the court that? No, because they wanted to cover something up. That's my view. But the court said, no, I see what you did there. And the court essentially ordered the Justice Department to provide information on Special Counsel Jack Smith's communications with Fani Willis. Judge Dabney Friedrich of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, so she's a judge in the federal court here in D.C., ruled that because the cases against Trump were closed, the Justice Department arguments against disclosure were no longer applicable. Since DOJ filed its motion for summary judgment and supporting declaration in March 2024, the special counsel's criminal enforcement actions have been terminated, the court wrote. The cases are closed, not pending or contemplated, and therefore are not proceeding with which disclosure may interfere. Thus, the agency's sole justification for invoking the Glomar exemption. You can look up Glomar. It's a fun story. Glomar. That's the legal case that justifies the I can't confirm or deny exception that the government sometimes uses. Now, what do they use it? What's it designed to be used for? What is it typically used for? Let's say the CIA is asked for, give me a list of spies that you have sitting in the Kremlin. Well, the CIA is going to come back. I can't confirm or deny whether there are any spies there, because one way or the other, it's going to be helpful to our enemies. Now, why on earth that would apply to communications with a district attorney in Georgia trying to jail a former president of the United States? Obviously it doesn't, but that's what the argument was. And the court wrote, accordingly, because there are no cases, the court will deny DOJ's motion for summary judgment. So the Justice Department lost against Judicial Watch in their efforts to squelch our requests for information on any collusion they had with Fani Willis, and grant the plaintiff's cross motion. DOJ is directed to process plaintiff Judicial Watch's request and either, quote, disclose any responsive records or establish both that their contents are exempt from disclosure and that such exemption has not also been waived. President Trump truly needs to overhaul, a Freudian slip. It doesn't mean a word. It's not really a word, but it still sounds funny. President Trump truly needs to overhaul the Justice Department from top to bottom. It is a scandal that a federal court had to order the Justice Department to admit the truth that their objections to producing records about collusion with Fani Willis no longer had any basis in reality. So we have many FOIA lawsuits still pending on the Jack Smith investigations. For example, he has been, and the Justice Department still is, hiding the names of the top prosecutors that were working for him in the efforts to try to jail Trump. That case is, I think, before the appeals court. Hey, Pam Bondi, Madam Attorney General, call your office. What's going on there? Give us the documents. But this is another victory against the abusers targeting Trump, not only in the Justice Department, but down there in Fulton County. And again, this is what I love about Judicial Watch. I love a lot of things about Judicial Watch. is that we just don't give up. Now, there are times when we have to stop because the court says you've lost. But these cases, in this case, it took nearly 2 years. We're coming on 2 years before we're going to even fully litigate the issue of what documents they have or don't have. Because for nearly a year and a half, they told us, we can't even tell you whether we were colluding with Fani Willis. Again, that was the position of this Justice Department. We can't even tell you if we talked to Fani. So when I say overhaul the Justice Department, I think that's being charitable. That's the sort of corruption and secrecy and scandal that we were facing. And we've had to fight in federal court. So we're thankful for the court for, I guess, stating the obvious, right? There's no cases, so what's the issue? What were you doing? So this is part of the reckoning and the accountability for the worst corruption in American history, the misuse of federal, state, law enforcement, or the power to jail in order to retaliate and violate the civil rights of President Trump and other American citizens. Fani Willis lost, and now the Justice Department is lost on the issue of any potential collusion issues related to Trump. Again, Judicial Watch's heavy lifting gets results, and it's only because of the persistence and really expert lawyering by our team that we're able to get the results we are able to get. And I would say, and I would be remiss if I did not say, without your support, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. So I encourage you to continue to support Judicial Watch. Go to judicialwatch.org if you haven't supported us before, or if you have, go on over there and give us another donation, because you kind of see the work we're able to do as a result. So we filed an important, on moving to the issue of elections. We still got a lot of election cases going, you know that? We've got cases in California, Illinois, Oregon, Mississippi, to clean up the voter rolls, to vindicate the rule of law that you can't count ballots that arrive after Election Day. As I've previously noted, our work in this area has cleaned up just in the last few years 4 million names from the voter rolls. Colorado, Pennsylvania, D.C., New York City, California, Kentucky, North Carolina. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but huge. But there's another area of law that we've been involved in, which is the issue of gerrymandering. And what is gerrymandering? It's funny, I was writing or editing our release, and we used the word gerrymander, and I thought, I wonder if people know what that literally means. I mean, we use it a lot here in D.C., and gerrymandering, so for those of you who don't know exactly what it means, you may have heard the phrase, but what does it really mean? It means basically when it comes time to figure out what congressional districts look like, they move people around and create districts that look ridiculous in order to guarantee certain results. So, and both parties do this to a certain extent. We had a big case in Maryland, for instance, where they had a political gerrymander to guarantee that the Republicans would only win in one district, I think. And we weren't looking for a specific electoral result. We were looking for an abuse in order to get that electoral result, which is moving people into districts that were not compact in any sensible way and in a way that basically erased their vote. So imagine being, for instance, in California and being a resident of, Sonoma County, and being in a district that went down the middle of the state into Los Angeles. I mean, do you think that's appropriate or proper? No. That's gerrymandering. It was named after Eldridge Gerry, or Gary, I think. Ronald Reagan used to call it gerrymandering. He hated gerrymandering, as he called it. So it's been around for as long as the Republic, virtually. So there's always going to be a certain amount of when a political party controls the legislature that has control over the apportionment process, which sets the districts, there's always going to be a certain amount of gerrymandering. And in many ways, it's appropriate in the sense that, well, the majority party reflects the votes of the citizens of the state, and so the citizens of the state, are going to get more members of Congress that accord with the majority party currently control the legislature. So I understand the political nature of it. You can't control it completely, but you can mitigate the worst aspects of it in terms of the corruption in a way that violates the rule of law. But it gets worse than just the political side of it. The left has decided, and unfortunately the Supreme Court has interpreted the law to allow political gerrymandering based on the color of your skin. And what happens is they move and essentially segregate voters by race to ensure what is called majority-minority districts in order to ensure that Democrats get elected and left-wing Democrats get elected. And the Constitution, I don't think, allows it. And what the Supreme Court has said was, well, you can do it for gerrymandering, but you can't for redistricting, they called it. But race-conscious decision-making, for instance, in Harvard admissions, is illegal. Well, how does that work? It doesn't. And that's why we filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court as they're being asked to reconsider this issue. We filed an amicus curiae brief with our friends at the Allied Educational Foundation that often partners with us on amicus curiae briefs. These are friend of court briefs that Judicial Watch files, or attorneys file, with courts to help them or point out specific legal issues in cases that they're considering. Parties obviously are doing the big heavy lifting in the fights. Amicus briefs and friend of court briefs can provide extra oomph on issues one way or the other, or even sometimes just provide factual issues or expert advice or analysis to the courts that the courts value as they consider the cases. So we're essentially asking the Supreme Court, to affirm a lower court ruling that found that using race to set up congressional districts is an abomination. And it was in a Louisiana redistricting fight from just a few years ago. In their amicus brief, it's our amici brief because it's now more than one person filing or more than one group, the court has compared race-based districting to segregation of public parks, buses, and schools, and warned that we should not be carving electorates into racial blocks. There should be no question that the race-based division of citizens for purposes of redistricting is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, the central purpose of which is to prevent the states from purposefully discriminating between individuals on the basis of race. Racial gerrymandering, like all racial classifications of any sort, cause lasting harm to our society because they reinforce the belief held by too many for too much of our history that individuals should be judged by the color of their skin. We're asking the Supreme Court to put an end to race-based congressional districting. The Biden administration, by the way, jumped into the case at the last minute because they wanted to help continue this monstrosity under law, seeking to maintain the race-based status quo, requiring separating and segregating voters by race for congressional elections. Now, we're hoping the Trump Justice Department does, and we think it should, instead urge the court to restore non-discrimination as the foundation of voting rights again. So the court there's this weird disconnect between court rulings on using race to put people in congressional districts while disallowing race to put people in schools, as a basis to put people in schools. Now, the left will have you believe, well, this helps minorities. Does it help minorities to be put in the equivalent of a congressional ghetto so some Democrats can get elected? Or does it help minorities to have their political power separated among various districts and where they're given more of a political oomph in, let's say, Republican-leading districts? I mean, if a Republican has a district that has no minorities in it, practically speaking, right? Because Democrats have moved them all to ensure they get elected in their districts. Well, why would a Republican pay attention to the views of minority groups in their voter, in terms of their voting issues? Plus, it's illegal. We shouldn't put people in congressional districts on the basis of race. The Constitution prohibits it. You can't be denied equal protection of law on the basis of race. Does it get any simpler than that? Does it? Supreme Court? There are some things only a lawyer could do, or only a judge would allow, with all due respect. And we're hoping the Supreme Court follows Judicial Watch's lead and the lead of many other observers who really want to end the racial strife and division here in the United States that's furthered by encouraging politicians in the states to segregate and separate voters by race into congressional districts. I just can't believe that that we even have to make the point to the Supreme Court in this day and age. I mean, we've got a case in Illinois along these lines. By the way, Judicial Watch is a leading civil rights organization. The civil rights organizations of the left have now agreed that racism is okay and discrimination is okay. They've abandoned the field. So it's up to groups like Judicial Watch to take the lead to enforce the traditional understanding and interpretation of the Constitution and civil rights laws. The Constitution says equal protection of the law based on race, despite your race. The left does not believe that. In Evanston, Illinois, they're giving out reparations, supposedly for housing discrimination in the past. And the only, you don't have to prove housing discrimination, but you do have to identify as an African American or black. Whites need not apply. Other races need not apply. It's blatant racism. That's why we filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. And we published this week in an informative educational new video on the reparations fight, which the left is obsessed with pursuing.
The left is obsessed with race-based reparations. Leftists use reparations and other handouts to redistribute wealth to favored groups, purportedly to remedy systemic racism and historical inequalities. The nation's first race-based reparations program was created by the city of Evanston, Illinois. In 2021, the Chicago suburb began earmarking what would become $20 million to pay $25,000 to persons who identify as Black or African American. It began approving cash payments 2 years later. Called the City of Evanston Local Reparations Restorative Housing Program, the scheme purports to remedy housing discrimination in Evanston and explicitly conditions eligibility on race. Applicants need only show that they identify as Black or African American and that they or a Black or African American ancestor lived in Evanston at any time between 1919 and 1969 and were at least 18 years old at the time. Applicants need not prove that they or their ancestors suffered any actual discrimination by Evanston. The children, grandchildren, and even the great-grandchildren of persons who lived in Evanston as many as 106 years ago can receive a payment. Whites, Hispanics, Asians, or anyone identifying as anything other than Black or African American need not apply. Renowned economist Dr. Thomas Sowell describes demands for reparations as a stroke of genius to keep Blacks separated from other Americans and an aggrieved constituency to support Black leaders in politics, organizations, and movements. In 2024, Judicial Watch filed a federal civil rights lawsuit challenging the program on behalf of individuals who would be eligible to receive a $25,000 payment but for their race. The lawsuit argues that the program violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This provision makes treating people differently based on their race presumptively unconstitutional. Judicial Watch filed its lawsuit as a class action because it estimates that there are tens of thousands of persons who, like our clients, would be eligible to participate in the program but for their race. As U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in a 2007 case, the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating based on race. Evanston's program discriminates on the basis of race and is unconstitutional as a result. Judicial Watch's historic lawsuit not only seeks to stop Evanston's unconstitutional program, but also puts other cities, counties, and states considering reparations programs on notice that race-based programs will not go unchallenged in the courts, because no one is above the law.
That was a good little video, huh? I encourage you to share it with your friends and your family, your church, etc. We'll have a link to it separately below. But this is an essential lawsuit. The left has been watching this very carefully. I talked to a reporter from the Boston Globe the other day. What's going on is these other left-wing states and cities are running commissions to figure out if they can do reparations. Well, they've kind of been in a holding pattern. Many observe, not just I'm not saying this, the left is saying this, practically speaking, to the media. They're kind of waiting to see how this case turns out. Now, hopefully the Biden, well, it's no longer the Biden Justice Department, it's the Trump Justice Department will take some action here as well. But this is important. Do you think that we should begin really destroying the American civic fabric through these reparations programs that are inherently antagonistic and full of pernicious racial favoritism and punishment? I don't. I mean, not only is it awful policy, but it's illegal on its face. And that's why we're in court right now. So racial gerrymandering, no. Reparations, no. DEI, no. All of those policies, CRT, no, are designed to destroy America and our way of life by cleaving a vicious separation between the races. And that's not the American way. So what's Kamala Harris doing? You may wonder. I don't know what she's doing. I think I saw her. She was at a sports event. Did I see a video of her at a sports event? I guess the last video of her was she was out shopping. So she's retired. I don't blame her for trying to take it easy after her coup. But we're still interested in what she was doing when she was working at the Biden White House as vice president. And that's why we sued the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Defense Department for details about her travels. How much, Kamala, did you spend traveling around the world? Doing what? People will debate. We filed the FOIA lawsuit after the Secret Service and the Air Force failed to respond to August 2024 requests for all records concerning the use of government funds to provide security and/or services to Vice President Kamala Harris and any companions while traveling. The Biden White House website reports that during her term as vice president, Kamala Harris made 17 foreign trips, traveling to 21 countries and meeting with over 150 world leaders. But there are no publicly available flight logs or other records that provide details about who accompanied her on these trips. Like, remember when Joe Biden went to China and Judicial Watch figured out the details about Hunter going along and meeting with his Chinese business partners and Chinese leaders while with Joe hanging around in a way to advance their business interests? Just before Vice President Harris' last official trip in early 2025, AP reported that her husband, Doug Emhoff, was expected to accompany her to Singapore, Bahrain, and Germany. However, this is the only non-governmental person specifically mentioned as accompanying her on any official trip. So not only have the flight logs been hidden, but we don't know what the costs are, and those costs can be easily described to us and reported. So it's what's going on here. Well, let me take a step back. During the Obama administration, this is how we got into this. I'll tell you the story. President Obama came into the Oval Office, and one of the first things he did was he made it was a big hullabaloo of taking his wife on a date night to New York City. And I'm like, well, that's cute, but how much did it cost to bring him up to New York City? Oh, well, we know how to ask that question. And so that's what generated our interest in the cost of presidential travel. Obama's date night up to New York City. And by the way, he didn't take Air Force One, we found out. It was a smaller airplane. And it cost $29,000, so just so you know. I think it was, I'm going by memory, it's now, I don't want to know how long ago 2008 was. And so we followed up with a series of FOIA requests tracking his travel, is basically his unnecessary travel. We didn't track official travel. And it just drove the Obama people crazy because the numbers didn't lie. We put them out. It was straightforward analysis, and they got attention every time we put them out. And of course, the big media wasn't interested in it. And so when Trump came in, we had been doing our basic travel FOIAs and such, but the media all of a sudden became interested in presidential travel. And so we had a few numbers out on Trump, and I appeared on the three major networks talking about Trump travel in the beginning of his administration, encouraging transparency, and he should take steps to basically cut the costs of presidential travel because it still costs too much. He'd be the first to tell you that. In fact, he did try to do that. And then, of course, the media got into the business of trying to track presidential travel, started not only FOIAing the Secret Service, but the Coast Guard and providing security, all sorts of insane level of detail just to make it controversial for Trump to engage in travel. Now, of course, he went down to Mar-a-Lago a lot or up to New Jersey during the summer months. But as you know, he was working all the time. So we didn't think it was as big as a deal. And we didn't do as much because all the media was doing it. And of course, Biden comes along. And what happens is the Secret Service and specifically the Air Force, they simply stop answering the requests. So, there was like a series of 10 or 12 requests they completely ignored. We had to sue over them, and they promised they would respond in the future to us after we got the court involved. Well, here we are again. We still can't get a straight response. This is straightforward information. Oh, Vice President Kamala Harris took plane X. It costs, literally, they have hourly rates, the hourly costs of aircraft, and it changes over time. And you can figure out what the cost of the travel is. Secret Service, we know what the numbers are for Secret Service costs because they track the personal expenses of the agents. So, the hotel bills, we get the hotel bills. So this is not secret material we're asking for. We've gotten this material in the past, and they don't want to turn it over, and they haven't wanted to turn it over for Kamala Harris. Why do I think they were covering up the cost of her travel? Because to benefit the political campaign of Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris. Of course, Harris was on the ticket no matter what. Hence, we're in court. In 2021, Judicial Watch uncovered White House travel records from the Secret Service in response to our FOIA requests for all records concerning the use of government funds to provide security and or other services to Biden and any companions. The records detail Secret Service travel costs of $2.2 million for Joe Biden through only August 8th of 2021, just the first 8 months. And then, of course, we received records showing Hunter Biden. He became president later when Joe completely came out of it. I'm just joking. I know he literally wasn't president. Hunter Biden traveled extensively while receiving a Secret Service detail And in that lawsuit, we uncovered that Biden took 411 separate domestic and international flights, including 29 different foreign countries. He visited China 5 times, and he dropped his Secret Service protection shortly before the end of the Obama term. And of course, during the last year and a half of the Obama administration, when he wasn't getting Secret Service protection anymore, guess where he was working? Burisma, Ukraine. We've gotten records about Trump's travels, $3 million and $17 million for travel related to President Trump. So we've been tracking the travel no matter who the president is. And I kind of see it as a, we talk about the Department of Government Efficiency. The travel, the security around the president is required, right? And the military, he's the commander-in-chief, so the military has a lot to do with the travel. They're responsible for it. So the question is, how cheaply can they do it in a way that provides him the national security, the typical security? He probably needs Air Force One to travel, for instance, to Florida. Does he need it to travel to New York? Maybe not. He may want it, but he may not need it. And we're just trying to get people to be more sensitive to the costs. And, we're not just looking at presidential travel, we've looked at congressional travel. Ask your members of Congress. This is a fun little project. Call your local member of Congress, 202-225-3121. Ask for your member of Congress and say, I'd like to know how many CODELs you have gone on. And what is a CODEL? That's short for congressional delegations, which are typically, CODELs are trips, congressional delegation trips to foreign countries. And I'll let you decide whether that's of value to the American taxpayer. But ask how many they go on. And we had investigated Nancy Pelosi's use of Air Force jets to travel back and forth to her home district. Remember that controversy? The cost of liquor on it, and just how unpleasant people were in Pelosi's office about dealing with the Air Force. They were gritting their teeth in dealing with Pelosi's office. They were so unpleasant. Like, for instance, they were in a crisis, as I recall, for the documents. Like, don't quote me on this. I know I'm saying it on the internet, but you can go look it up. So they needed a last-minute plane for some sort of jaunt. And Pelosi's people were calling saying, we need this plane. And they said, well, we don't have that plane. We have this other plane. Oh, no. They said they can fly commercial instead. Obviously they can turn in the ticket or get the government to pay for it outright. And you know what Pelosi's people said? Well, yeah, we know that's true, but you know how it gets with the spouses. They wanted the Air Force One type plane for Congress so the spouses could go on the trip for free. So I don't know, we should start, we have tracked, the CODELs have been less in recent years, but they still run them. But that's an area where Congress can save money as well. So this is I think an interesting part of Judicial Watch's work. Is it the most important thing that happens? Well, maybe. Look what it covered with Hunter Biden. We're just doing a straightforward FOIA request about what's going on with Hunter, and we found out he went to China 5 times and then he ditched Secret Service protection. No one knew that prior to our FOIA. So it's going to be interesting to find out what we can find out about Kamala Harris. So with that, I wish you the best. Have a great week. So much going on here at Judicial Watch. I'm surprised we were able to cover it all tonight. And I wish you a wonderful weekend and week, and I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.